Hello. Welcome to the Weather Skool podcast, where we dive into the world of meteorology, but with a twist. This isn't just about weather forecasts and storm tracking. We're here to hear the stories behind the meteorologists themselves. You'll get to know the people who bring you the weather every day, what drives them, what challenges they've faced, and how their personal journeys shape the work they do. If you're passionate about weather or curious about the lives of those who predict it, you're in the right place. So jump in as we explore the people behind the forecasts and discover what makes meteorologists truly unique. Welcome to Weather Skool, and this is the Weather Skool podcast project.
All right, hi everyone. I'm Justin Kiefer from the Weather Skool community, and this is the Weather Skool Skoolcast podcast project. And we are talking today with Ross Whitley. Ross is a professional broadcast meteorologist who currently lives in Bay County, Florida. He's in Panama City at WMBB, the ABC affiliate in Panama City, which is a Nexstar-owned television station. Full disclosure, Ross and I worked for a period of time a few years ago. We'll get to that part of the story coming up in just a bit. But Ross, I appreciate you coming on the podcast today, and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here. Excited to talk weather and maybe a little bit about me, talk about me somewhat. I don't know if I'm too comfortable about that, but hey, we'll see where the rabbit hole goes.
You know, let's start there. You're currently in the Florida Panhandle in Panama City, but kind of where are you from? Where'd you grow up? What kind of family did you have as a kid? Where's that at?
Yeah, I grew up in North Carolina, just north of Charlotte. Was born in Charlotte, so at the hospital there, just north Mecklenburg, which is still in place right there around Harrisburg. So in that area on basically where NASCAR is. That's basically where I was born, and it's basically where I grew up because I moved to Ray City, USA, which is Mooresville, North Carolina, and then lived there my entire life. So my family is heavily involved in racing in some form or fashion, even though none of my immediate family members, other than my brother-in-law who married in, are actually in racing. So just kind of a weird coincidence on how all of that worked together. But yeah, it was a good childhood and a good time. North Carolina is a good place for weather. You get all four seasons, and so I fell in love with the least season there, which was winter, and now I live in a place where winter doesn't exist. So,
yeah, the period of time that I got to work in North Florida, I think it snowed a couple of times, and a couple of times there was some what appeared to be snow.
Yeah,
and everybody was like really running around excited about that. But as it is, so from an early on point. So you get through with high school, and now what I know about you a little bit is that you were an athlete, a baseball player, and that took you on to college.
Yeah.
But and so we can talk a little bit about that. But eventually you got into meteorology in college. So if you could kind of talk us from, obviously the athletic path led you to university, but while at university, were you expecting to study meteorology at the same time?
Yeah, so from a very early age, I mean, even my youngest baseball coaches, T-ball, all the way down to coach pitch, they'd tell you, yeah, that guy was always into weather. He always loved weather. He was always staring at the sky. In fact, my dad used to tell me that I have videos of my dad yelling at me from the stands while I was playing in the outfield, asking if I wanted a seat to look at the clouds. like a seat so you can stare at the clouds. So I have that audio of my dad yelling at me. So I've always been obsessed with the weather. I think a lot of broadcast mets and research meteorologists, I think in general, have some kind of obsession, either an event or something in their past that has drawn them to that. I don't know if I ever really had that like keen moment where it was like, yeah, this is what obsessed me with the weather. But there were several times when I was younger where we had winter storms and ice storms in Charlotte where we ended up all sleeping in the living room together around the fireplace. And I think back to those days because I really remember them. They stick out in my early childhood. And I think that inquisical nature of trying to understand, like, hey, what happened? Why were we stuck inside for a full day? And what's going on? Why did the weather freeze? Why is it frozen outside? I think that why and just wanting to know is what led me to want to do the weather, is because I mean, what greater puzzle is there still left on the earth than weather? I mean, we know so much about the atmosphere and weather, but we just, I mean, we see event after event after event where we're like, well, we did a really good job, but we missed this. And we did a really good job here, but we missed that. And we did a really good job, but we missed this. And like, why didn't we see that? Why didn't we know that this was coming? Why didn't the models pick up on that? That's
Right.
still very much a big question mark even today. And I think I was very fortunate of when I grew up prior to social media. So you didn't have all of this information just being constantly thrown at you. I had to learn it. You know,
Right.
it
Yep.
was, it wasn't this, oh, well, here's an answer for the question. It was, go research it, go figure it out, go find it,
Yeah.
go ask
Yeah.
somebody who knows more information about it and get that information. And for me, those people were broadcast meteorologists. Those were the people on TV that were telling me the answers to the questions that I wanted to hear. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to be that guy. I want to be able
Nice.
to say, hey, this is what's going on, and this is why, and this is why you're stuck at the house. So I think from early age, I think that's probably what led me to that. And then I was just fortunate. I think it's kind of a flip of the script. I was just fortunate enough to be athletic, so I got to play baseball in college. It wasn't really that it was like where I was driven for baseball and then I found a love for weather at college. It was kind of the opposite. I was driven for weather, and I just was fortunate enough to be able to carry that baseball career all the way up into college, and that allowed me to get an education that was somewhat paid for and have the ability to travel around the U.S. and
Cool.
do a lot of things that I never would have gotten to do had it not been for baseball. So baseball was kind of a travel avenue and an outlet away from my obsession, which was weather.
Oh, well, that's a the interesting thing is that I have a similar story, although my baseball career ended shortly, probably about a minute after high school graduation, somewhere in there. Um, so my career goal of playing for the Braves was out, but I always had that fascination with weather from a really young age. I've got a lot of brothers, and they were all sort of armchair meteorologists and backyard meteorologists. In fact, my next oldest brother and I had a weather station. I don't know if we bought it at Radio Shack or bought it somewhere, but it had a little anemometer. It had a little rain
Wow,
gauge
that's
and
pretty good.
thermometer. Now you had to go. It didn't like send it like the new electronics where it sends it into your house. You had to go out there and read
Check.
the thermometers,
Yeah.
and then you kept a daily log. So that was pretty cool. I was probably 7 or 8 years old at the time, and I tell this story when I was 7. My father had a radio that had you could listen to all the shortwave radio bands on it, and I didn't know anything about long wave, shortwave, AM or FM. I just know that you could click it onto one of these channels, and we were listening to radio stations in New Orleans when Hurricane Camille hit.
Wow.
And so I don't think I was even yet 7 at the time. And so it was fascinating to me to hear the stories. And also that kind of ginned up a little bit of interest in my weather.
Well, hello.
We'll have to do some editing here.
It's funny, mine just walks behind me too.
Go lay down. This will be carefully edited out. That's Waylon, by the way.
Wayland.
That's
Hey,
Waylon.
Wayland.
We'll sit down. Oh no, this is not good. All right, they have hopped down, but he's now getting. Last time I did this, they laid on the couch for an entire hour and didn't make a noise. I'm about to,
Yeah, there you go.
I'll come
You
back and do
might
some
need to
editing.
go outside.
Give me a break. Give me 1 second. Come on here. Oh, that was pretty funny. Hopefully they'll settle down. All right. So okay, we'll regroup here. Shoot. Uh, so it, no, so
So Camille, you were talking
yeah,
about
so,
Camille.
so that was just one of the things that kind of spurred my interest, but I never really had meteorology as sort of the forefront. Oh, I'm going to go study this. I'm going to go. It just wasn't the thing until later on in like my first year in college when a counselor said, well, because I was sort of meandering through that first year of college
Right.
without really a declared major. And she said, well, what do you like? What are you interested in? And I went, well, I like the weather. and so, and so I was like, all right, let's go find a school. And there was nothing, the closest school was in Tallahassee at Florida State.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, we'll go make something happen there. So, but it was that initial sort of that Camille interest in my backyard weather station. I think my first little project in second grade, I made a thermometer with a card and a piece of elastic that was red on one side and white on the other, and you could pull it back and forth. Anyway, it was just kind of silly, but there was always a sort of internal interest in the weather, and it was great to be able to bring that out. When you got to college and you were studying, was TV, was broadcast meteorology where you think you were going to go with this, or had you different, maybe a career path in mind?
Yeah, I think I was always thought that that's what I wanted to do. I'm not sure I really knew what that entailed until I got to my internship, and then I think my internship kind of reaffirmed, like, yeah, this is what I want to do. But it was a rude awakening on the internship because it was like, yeah, this is what I want to do, but you're also really bad at it. So it was like, yeah, you're gonna have to practice a lot because you are really bad at this. And that was a big eye opening. I think that's a big change between now and then. Is prior to social media, people just weren't used to having a camera in their face. People weren't used to talking and doing and speaking and saying things flawlessly. And now kids are so used to it that day one they step in front of the camera and it's just like boom, and you're like, I didn't have that ability. Like I struggled for a year and a half just to talk cleanly. Like that ability. So I think that's a huge change that we've seen from digital presence that's developed. So from where I was, but yeah, it was certainly. I think I was always geared toward that. I mean, I definitely had that obsession. I mean, in high school, one of my teachers even let me teach the weather segment.
There you go.
My junior year in high school. Yeah, he was like, "Yeah, we're getting ready to do the environmental section. Do you want to go through it?" And I was like teach it. And he goes, "Yeah. Can you do that?" And I was like, "Ask me anything." And he started asking me questions, and I was just giving him the answers. And he goes, "You can teach this segment." I go, "Okay." So he let me teach that segment, and that was AP. What was it? Was AP Bio or something? Because you cover everything in high school.
Right.
So yeah, I got to do that. So I think I was always kind of geared toward that. And then the internships that I had a really good internship. I got to do one with a radio station in Salisbury, North Carolina, and then one with, at time, it was Time Warner in Charlotte. Now it is Spectrum.
Right.
And the same Met, Jeff Crum, Chief Met. He's the guy who I did my internship with, and that was, 10, 11 years ago now. So feeling old, but I'm sure there's many others in the business that feel a lot older than I do.
So I won't answer that. So when folks watch a television broadcast and a newscast, and in that newscast is the weather segment, and in that weather segment you provide a forecast that people can use to plan their day, their night, their week, or wherever it is. Tell us a little bit, and I find it fascinating to hear the different sort of nuances of your daily routine. Like, so where people may not know, hey, this is what I do on a daily to
Yeah.
produce that 3-minute weather forecast. Why don't you step through that a little bit?
Yeah, I think everybody thinks we show up to the TV station and we just talk about the weather for 3 minutes and then we go home. I've even had some people tell me, like, how long are you at the station? And I'm like, I work like a 10-hour day every day. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I get there at 2. I don't go home until 11. I do have a decent break for dinner, but yeah, like I put in 5, 6 solid hours of work every single day. And then I have about 3 hours where we get to do the fun part. We get to be on news. We get to talk and do the enjoyable part. And while that's not what I would consider work, it certainly is putting on a show, and it
Yeah.
is taxing, and it's definitely work. It's not physically intensive, but it definitely is mentally intensive and definitely taxing on you. So it puts a lot out of you, even on the daily basis. I'm always surprised by how tired I am at the end of the day.
Yeah. No.
It's
Well,
like I didn't do anything today, but I'm exhausted.
the performance end of it is an interesting thing. I do a lot from home before I ever get into a building.
Yeah.
I'll spend an hour or more just analyzing uh, forecast models and taking a look at what's evolving. So when I hit the seat at my desk, I don't have to spend a lot of time doing that. So I'll work from home quite a bit before I ever get there.
Yeah, I think I what I do personally is I never really step away from the models, so I kind of see every run as they're happening. I mean, the Euro runs 4 times a day, the GFS or the Euro runs twice a day, but you get 4 runs because you get a 6Z and 18Z on a shorter duration.
Right.
And then the GFS, which is our other big global forecasting model, runs 4 times a day. So I see all of those. So all of our big model runs, I'm watching constantly. So it's not like I'm never unaware of what the weather is. So when I go in, I already have a concept of what the forecast is and what we're going to do and kind of how I want to shape that. In fact, most of the time when I'm driving in, I start thinking about how do I want to orient my graphics? What's
That's right.
the topic today? What story can I create out of this? And then what's the main focus? What's going to be most important across the area? That starts happening as I'm driving. And then when you get there, it's kind of refreshing, going through the forecast and refreshing, making sure you know exactly what you're doing, making sure you're not missing anything in the forecast, going back through the models again. And then you get distracted with everything else that has to be done throughout the day. So
Right.
you got to update digital, you got to update the website, you got to update radio, you got to update social, you got to update. So then you start doing all of that. And then by the time that all gets done, you got about an hour, hour and a half before the show starts, and you're like, okay, now that I've got some of my forecasting done and I've got all the rest of the out of the way, I can actually start building my show, building my material, and getting stuff. So then you just work solidly for an hour to get all of that prepped and ready. And then, you 30 minutes to kind of review, put scripts in, and get the show stuff and make sure that you didn't miss anything or screw anything up. And at somehow or another, you still miss a mistake because it seems like every single show I'm watching and I'm like, yep, forgot to change that. Yep. Or, yep, that's yesterday's information. It's like there's always one graphic where you're like, I've checked this 3 times. How did I miss that? And
I wish
between the 5 and 6, it gets corrected. So if people watch the 6 o'clock, they're like, hey, or if they watch the 5 and 6, like, why did this change? And they're like, shh.
That's right.
I can do that.
The part of the nuts and bolts of what we do, we have these graphics that come on the screen in front of us, the Chiron graphics, and built in that would be your name.
Yep.
And underneath that, there's usually 4, in my situation, what they'll call it a lower third, and there's just a little bit of a weather, 2 or 3 word weather descriptor as there's at the top of the newscast when you're sort of, here's what's coming up kind of thing. There's no spell check in that.
Yeah.
And so too many times I've typed in the word storm but it came out STROM and it looks like Strom.
Strom.
I'll see it go to air and I go, oh man, I did that again.
I do that all the time. Strom and Claude instead of cold.
Absolutely.
Coming through tonight, or clodder conditions tonight. I'm like, say cold, but yeah, that is I'm dyslexic, so the Barron link system that we use doesn't have spell check. And,
right.
Then the Chiron system doesn't have spell check, and our ticker system doesn't have spell check. So, I get caught with misspellings all the time. People are like, that meteorologist can't even spell anything. How is he getting the weather right? And I'm like, yeah, that's a good point.
and so you have just acknowledged that you are dyslexic, and that has to be because as you look at your studies in college, and we have these strings of letters and exponents and numbers and differential equations and things like that. You know,
In your editing, you're going to have to pull up the QG omega equation here and put it on the screen so people can see exactly what you're talking about. We're talking about a long line of numbers and letters that just
yeah.
like a garbled mess to somebody that is normal brained, of somebody that is dyslexic and looking at that and trying to mix it all up in your head. So yeah,
Well, I mean, good
pull
on
up
you for
the
being
equation and everybody will understand.
for being able to take that and use it, but actually, I'm sure that it has to make you focus a little bit more. I don't know many people with that have to work in that environment with that as a I wouldn't call it a handicap, but it certainly is a limiting learning limit, if you will,
Yeah.
or at least something that will govern your ability to like spell graphics correctly.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. Most of the time when I go and do school talks, I usually start with that. I'm dyslexic, and that because I want to give motivation to students that think I can't do this because I have a disability, or I'm not good at math, or I'm not good at speaking, or whatever it is. And I try to tell them like, hey, I had to battle through it. Like none of this was easy. Like school wasn't easy. College certainly wasn't easy. Learning all the equations, none of that was easy. But it really boils down to patience, and I think that a lot of people don't understand that. People think intelligence is intelligence, and it's not. It certainly there is an ability there that you have to have and an understanding that you have to have. But I've seen people that were told they can never do anything do things, and that is more than intelligence. That has to do with willpower and patience. And math wasn't easy. Certainly with the dyslexia, the English and getting through all the schooling was terribly difficult. I grew up with an IEP. I had special designations for testing, and basically I was told that you have a disability through school. I was told as an elementary and middle school that I wouldn't go to college. I was told that I was going to be, I was going to be limited into what I could do going into the future, just because of that disability. That's what I was told. And none of that was right. It was all wrong. It was all wrong. Not only did I go to college, I have 3 degrees. I have a degree in atmospheric science, I have a degree in communication, and I have a minor in math from my atmospheric science. So, haha to all those people that college you need to get a degree because you're dyslexic, that you need to go to a trade school or do something like that. I mean, that's seriously was what counselors were telling me
Wow.
with the IEPs and that kind of stuff. So, it's patience. It's patience. It's hard, and some people are going to be able to jump in and they're going to blow by you because they get it, they understand it,
Yeah.
it clicks for them. And that's everything in life. Some things are just easy for some people in every aspect, and some things are really hard for some people in every aspect. That doesn't make what one person's accomplishments better than the other person's accomplishments. It just means that they both accomplished the same kind of thing. So
Yeah.
congratulations. I think that's where I get told have a lack of empathy a lot of times, and I think that that's probably where that lack of empathetic comes from, is because I was always told I can't do something, and I did it anyways. So like I don't really empathize real well when somebody says, "Well, I can't do this," because then I'm like, "Yes, you can." My mind, I'm like, I was told the same things, and you absolutely can do those things. Just because there are minor impacts on your ability to do something doesn't mean you won't have the ability to do it. It does take time, it takes effort, it takes patience, but you can do it. I mean, I spent hours staring at a blank sheet of paper in college going, I'm never going to be able to do this. I'm never going to do this. Like, my brain was telling me I'm never going to be able to do this. Just looking at it, and like, I don't know what any of that means.
Man, oh man. Well, one of the questions I have on my sheet here is if you could tell somebody watching this something about yourself that many people don't know, but I think you just did that. And I'm so proud of knowing that fact about you, and awesome that you are to speak so eloquently about it. I appreciate you sharing that part of your life. And also, I think that people will find that extremely motivational because, you know, there's a sense that we do what we do, and not robotically, but there's such a human element to everybody's story, and I think that's really important to let people understand and know that. And so I appreciate you sharing it, and more importantly, I appreciate you being so eloquent about it. So thank you for that. One thing we said at the very beginning is that at one point, Ross and I worked together. So we're going to flash back to 2018.
Oh boy.
So 6 years ago, right?
Oh boy.
And so Ross and his wife got to Panama City. I believe it was either late June or early July.
I started June 18th at the station. So
June 18th.
I think I got here at the beginning of June because I had about 2 weeks where I was here, you know, getting my internet and all that kind of established.
Right.
And then I started about the second week I was here. So yeah, I think it was June 18th. It was the start date. But yeah.
So the hurricane season had just started.
Yeah.
We had gone through one storm earlier around Memorial Day of that year.
Yeah, Alberto. It was Tropical Storm Alberto. Yeah.
And it was from that
Rainstorm.
so we flash through the hurricane season, and in October, as we record this particular podcast, it is the anniversary date of Hurricane Michael.
Yes.
And for those who may not know, obviously there's been a lot of hurricane stories the last few years for the state of Florida. But Hurricane Michael is a Category 5 hurricane that formed in the first week of October and hit our town. It hit our county as a Category 5. And post-storm analysis now that I'm reading more and more about it is that winds, because nothing got measured at the surface and they've had to do some data analysis, I saw some numbers between 170 and 175 based on Eglin Air Force Base's radar and perhaps some of the last recon that was done before the storm made landfall. So with that said, Hurricane Michael was a bad storm. Yeah. And we both were working at WMBB in Panama City. And so if you could, because let me just tell you a little bit about sort of the operations leading into a hurricane. At a TV stations like ours, which was on the coast, you start working in these 12-hour shifts when an area goes under this hurricane warning. And so we began doing that a couple of days earlier. Mm-hmm. And then the day before, while it was in this Michael was out in the Gulf of Mexico, and as a developing hurricane, my shift ended, Ross's shift began, which was in the middle of so we're leading up to the middle of the night. Say that again. Because I will have to say your connection's going in and out a little bit, but hopefully we'll get the gist of this. And at the time that Ross is then on the air, I'm trying to get a little bit of sleep, Michael begins to intensify rapidly. So if you could take us through sort of your memory of that overnight into the morning hours and what you were working through, what you were thinking about, and then we're going to talk a little bit about after the storm.
Yeah, I think you and I had two very different stories going through it because I was new to the area. So for me, the storm had a little more intrigue, especially prior, as to what was coming, and a little less dread and fear because I didn't really know the area all that well. And I've kind of come to see how that aspect changes when you're forecasting as you become more attached to an area and how things are developed, especially with the recent devastation with Carolina area that I am very much attached to, and that has dramatically impacted me from that system. And so it is kind of reminiscent as to how it would have been had I been here prior to that and had more of an attachment to the area. So
Yeah.
I got to look at it a little bit differently, and I had a bit of a different perspective as the storm was coming in. Still, that existential threat of dread of fear. I think most people don't understand that from meteorologists is that, like, we're human and we're just as scared and impacted by that storm that's coming in as anybody else is, and we feel that emotional weight and burden more than probably most of the public as that storm is approaching. And you still have to get your and your ready and everybody out and do all of those things that everybody else is doing, but you're also trying to inform everyone
Right.
while you're doing it. So for me, I had come off of, I just moved here. I was working in Little Rock prior, but I had several I was forecasting tropical weather for. So I had tropical weather experience, but I had never been in a system before, going through the storm and actually living through it. I had forecasted them and been a part of the forecast, saw the aftermath, done all of that. I had done that through 10, 12 storms. So it wasn't new. It just was new to actually live and be impacted through the storm at the same time. And that's probably a rare case too, because in most cases, most stations are probably not directly impacted by a storm. They're usually in the area, but
Right.
they probably aren't severely hit. So I think that we're probably a rare case of where we were severely hit and we were trying to communicate those impacts going out. That just doesn't happen all that often. So
Yeah.
leading up to it, it really for me was just trying to get my bearings and understand, what this event is and that kind of stuff. And then that shift change, yeah, that's when reality really started smacking hard. Because we had talked about it the day before. We had gone through some of the hurricane models and we were looking and we were like, some of these models are dropping it down to like 920, 930. Like, that's not real, right? Like, we're not going to see 920 or 930 out of this storm as it's approaching shore. Like, it's got southwest shear. It's coming out of a gyre. Gyre systems just don't tighten up like that. Like, you just don't get these surface lows to have these tight cores out of these big, broad gyre systems.
Right.
At least that was the mindset at that time, because you just hadn't seen so many gyre systems develop and tighten up like that. There's been very few in history until as of late. Adalia and Helene both tightening up right at the end, and they were both gyre systems as well. So the last 2 years, we've kind of seen that become a trend. Hopefully that doesn't continue, because if it does, the Gulf is really certainly in for a world of hurt. So I hope that that's not a continuing trend. But yeah, every update from 2 o'clock on, it was like rapid intensification, rapid intensification, rapid intensification. I think it was about 5 a.m. because you went and tried to go get some rest, and you came back short on your shift change, and which I think I had come back short on my shift change too, because I believe I was supposed to not change over until 2, and I think I joined you at like 11 p.m.
Yep.
I was like, you know what, I'm awake. Let's just do it. Let's go. And that's that adrenaline you just can't turn off during those events. It just won't allow you to relax or rest. But yeah, every update. And then once we got to, I'm not sure exactly what morning update it was. It might have been the 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock update that was coming in. But it was it was either getting ready to be a category 4 or was a category 4 at that point in time. And the update came in, and it was like a 15 millibar drop between the 2 updates. And the millibar pressure had dropped so severely, the wind speeds hadn't really increased yet. But the pressure was representative of about where Andrew came ashore. Mm-hmm. And I started laughing when you read it off. You read out you read it out. You were on air and you read it out. And I was at the wall and you were running the wall for me and you were reading out the latest update. And I just started chuckling. And everybody in the studio was just kind of like, what? Like, Ross has lost it. He's a maniac now. Like, his brain has gone. We've all been awake too long, and maybe we need a break. And it dawned on me when you read it out loud. And I was like, this is now below the pressure of Andrew. We're talking about a storm that's below the pressure of Andrew. And that's, in my mind, I went, oh, crap. Like,
It's like an incredulous sort of the incredulity of that's not possible. I agree with
Yeah, it was like we're not talking about this storm being like an impactful storm. We're talking about history. We're talking about something that is going to change everything here. And that was really that first moment where it was like,
you. Yeah.
it became a reality. I think we knew the possibility was there, and we knew that there was a chance that we see this thing really rapidly intensify. But and the models have gotten better since then. I mean, they've dramatically improved in the last 5 years on intensity forecasting. But that one was really, really bad intensity forecasting from the very beginning, because every single run, the models just were under. They were under. Every single run was under, 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 under. And so there was no reason to believe that we were just going to suddenly get explosive growth out of this storm. And then when it started happening, it was like, it's happening. We're not stopping this. It's coming. And we knew it was coming here. So
that's the thing.
So it just became, it was like a smack of reality as that night went on. And then it was like, all right, well, what is it going to look like on the other side? And then you're telling people at that point in time, like, it's not poorly built homes that are damaged. It's not, some trees that are falling. It's not a couple people are losing power. We're talking about well-built homes are going to sustain damage. Poorly built homes are going to be gone. We're talking about structural damage across the entire county that is going to change the face of the way the county looks. I mean, like, that's when that dawned on me, and that's when we started communicating that. And where it was like, hey, look, we're no longer in a dangerous situation, and we're in a catastrophic situation. Like, this is going to be a catastrophe. Yep. And that was when our news director at that time came in and told me, it was like, Ross, you need to tone it down, scaring people. And I just looked at him point blank, and I said, it's what's going to happen. I don't know how you want me to sugarcoat it or not scare people, because that's what's going to happen. Like, we're going to see this place change forever. It's coming. Like, sorry, I don't know how to change that. I can't, and I think that's the burden of broadcast meteorologists in general. And maybe most broadcast Mets never have to experience that burden of knowing what's going to happen and knowing what it's going to look like, trying to communicate that when everybody else has no clue what that perception of what something is going to look like. I think that is the ultimate burden of broadcast Mets, is that we see it. We see the visual medium. We see the aftermath. We see tornado destruction. We see hurricane destruction. We see flooding destruction. We know what it's going to look like, and we're trying to communicate that. And then you're trying to communicate something that, on a historical perspective, to an individual that has no idea what the power of water looks like, what the power of wind looks like, what the power of rain looks like, or a tornado, like no conceptual idea. And you're trying to tell them mind-bending power is getting ready to come. And you need to listen. And it's just like, you want to reach through the camera and just shake some people, like, hey, like, this might cost your life. Like, we're telling you, you could die. And people are still want to look at us and go, be fine. You're sensational.
I lived through Opal. Everything's going to be fine.
You still have people that are going to hear those words and go, never happened to me. I'll be fine. Never happened. I've never seen anything like that. It'll be fine. And then those same people will turn around and go, well, why didn't you warn me afterwards?
So and I think you make a great point about sort of the burden as a broadcast meteorologist, because 364 days out of the year, it might be just a regular forecast, and there's one day out of the year where it could take your home or your life. And so it's a great point about that burden, if you will, as being a broadcast meteorologist. There were two things for me. The Tuesday, so the storm hit on a Wednesday. The Tuesday before, I was on a conference call with a lot of the Nexstar media people across the Gulf Coast. And I had just taken a look at some modeling, and it was an older model run, because I think the conference call was late morning. So that model run would have been from the overnight. But and again, the modeling's gotten better. But this particular sort of high resolution hurricane specific forecast model had extreme winds and low pressure, and it was really the only one. And my heart sunk. I was like, oh man, this is, if this comes to be, then it's going to be awful. And so I kind of conveyed that in the conference call. But more importantly, it sort of sunk into my heart. It's like,
That's
this
a
is going to be,
possibility.
yeah, this could be really, really bad. So I'm standing in my front yard going, all right, so if it hits to the east, those trees are going to blow this way. And if it hits to the west, I was like calculating what's coming down, because I knew the wind at that point was going to be catastrophic. And then the other point where my sort of sensibility turned, because I knew so many people in the market, in our town and our county and throughout North Florida, was when the National Weather Service office in Tallahassee issued the extreme wind warning
Yeah.
for Gulf County, which is the neighboring county to the east, and Eastern Bay County, which is essentially you're going to get tornadic winds over the entire area.
Yeah.
And it hadn't been that forecast hadn't been sent out many times prior to that. I think
It was the fourth edition of the extreme wind warning. They've since used it 5 times,
yeah, including last night with Hurricane
including
Milton.
last night. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there was like this thing that hit me. It was almost this, oh, crud. It's like, we knew it was going to be bad. You're talking about being bad. You know what it's going to produce. But the words sunk in
Yeah.
at a point in my sort of sensibility of like, I don't like any of that. I don't like any of this.
Here, I don't want to be a part of this. Yeah.
But
That goes through the mind.
fortunately, if you will, the loss of life was really low.
Yeah.
The storm surge, the storm surge in Mexico Beach was 14 or 15 feet. But maybe some folks took the warning at last. They hit a kind of an isolated spot of the county, that kind of thing. All those sort of worked into our favor as far as loss of life. Property, though, was, as we have talked about, was destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah. The loss of life really, that was a big shocker for me on the backside of it. And I still, I think that's another burden that meteorologists carry. I still remember 27 people died in Bay County and 57 people in total for the whole storm. I mean, that's the numbers between Florida to North Carolina. And I'll never forget, because that was, a storm that we worked. And that was, those are lives that we impacted. And even though we're not directly responsible for that, because those people made their own decisions and they, made those, there's, an aspect of you is like, well, if I had said this word differently, would that make a difference? And I think you think about that, but it is just such a ridiculous ruminating thought, because it's like, yeah, the information's out there and all you can do is provide that information. You can't get people to hear it. And no matter what you do, you're always going to have that aspect. So I think that it's hard to tamper down that emotion, because that's definitely a response that you have. And I fail to do so too. I do it with every storm. Like I said, I still remember the number of deaths. I know exactly there were 4 fatalities in Mexico Beach. I mean, like, those numbers, you don't forget them, because that is a part of you and of what you did.
Right.
And so it impacts you forever. And I think that that's part of what changes you prior to a storm, post storm. I think every storm you go through, especially a catastrophic event, changes you on a personal level on some kind of aspect.
You're absolutely
evaluate something differently about yourself, or about the area, or about your family, or whatever it may be. Those storms always bring perspective. And they definitely change perspective too.
When we post up this edition, and I'll try to put the geostrophic equation, like you said, at one point.
You're gonna have to bring up the QG omega equation.
But I have this iconic photograph, and I don't think I've shared it. It's on my phone. As we took a tour of Eastern Bay County, it probably was 2 days. I've lost a little bit of memory time from Wednesday until Friday or Saturday. But I know that we were.
Yeah, I don't know the order of things at which they occurred, but I do remember doing them.
It's this iconic picture. There's this display F-15 at a park on the east side of Panama City that was twisted off of its mooring and was flipped upside down, and you're standing on it. So I snapped this picture on my phone, but it's sort of symbolic of like the whole county is upside down.
Yep.
After that hurricane.
That F-15 got to fly one more time.
So
broke bolts and lifted up and then flipped over for sure.
if I can figure out the editing process, I may drop that picture here in that particular point. But listen, you know, the work that you do, the work that broadcast meteorologists do. There was an interview done by, I believe, by NPR shortly after the hurricane. It was still in that fall, and it was called "The First Informers," because everybody, you know, the first responders have this vital role. But he wanted to tell the story of what he called the first informers, and you know, it's incumbent upon us to get a message out of critical information, whether it be life saving, property saving. And then you just hope that it hits. You know, you hope that it goes in ears and that it hits. And so many times you get through and you go, well, you know, what happened? You know, why didn't they leave? You know, that kind of thing. But
Yeah,
you're,
I think
go ahead.
back, I went through, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No,
And
no, no.
you know, we get on tangents, and I know we wanted to focus more about, you know, personal stuff. Instead, I've kind of driven the conversation to weather,
It's all right.
because it's what I'm used to talking about. But I think back to in college. So when I was getting my communication degree, I went to a seminar on climate change. And the guy that was giving a speech, he was talking about energy needed for the future. And basically he was saying, like, we're all going to have a fusion reactor in the future. If we don't, we're going to have an energy crisis because we're not going to have the energy demand that we need. And I think the dude might have been right. Like, we're probably headed in that direction, but that's irrelevant to the story. What he said is that it only takes one person telling you you're wrong or telling you that's wrong for you to believe it. It takes 9 people telling you that information is right for you to be convinced. So 1 against the 9 is what convinces people to stay or not do anything. And that is the doubt that the human brain just processes. It's the survivorship bias, the I'll be okay because it's never happened to me. That's that aspect that you're never going to be able to shake from any aspect of any individual. And I think that's why people stay. It's because there's just that one voice that is it's either their voice or somebody else, or, oh, it won't be that bad. It'll be fine. You haven't experienced this. It's never happened like that here before. So why would it happen that way this time?
That's right.
I think that's, and now we have an ever-present voice that is that opposite end, and it's called social media. And then we have to combat that constantly now. Whether it be from the extreme end where you're getting, you know, hurricane forecast or hurricane posting where it's 380 hours out into the future. And it's like, that model isn't even obeying the laws of physics. But sure, yeah, let's go with that for a system.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, we're dealing with that constant information stream of opposing voices, no matter what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think that has made it even more challenging now than even 5 years ago when we dealt with Michael, because you had some of that in Michael, but it wasn't as prevalent as it is now. Now it's like everybody and their brother has a page on Facebook, TikTok, or Instagram or
I saw one this morning on Facebook, and I clicked in to follow who actually posted this, and they put a lot of weather stuff up with some graphic with a Hurricane Nadine hitting the Gulf Coast. In 10 weeks. No, in 8 days.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, it's like, is that possible? Sure. Is it likely? No, not at this point, because we don't have anything to back that up. So
it's so irresponsible, but yet it's, like you said, it's so prevalent these days.
Yeah, it's so prevalent. And I think that is that opposing voice that gets people to go, I'll be fine. It is that, you know, it used to be the internal voice. And I think you still have that. You have the internal voice. And then I think you also have an external voice now that is also like, it won't be that bad. Or even worse, I think that there's 2 ends of bad information spectrum, which is the overreaction and the underreaction. And a lot of what I have seen in our area, I say our area, it was your area for but in this area is the overreaction. Since Michael, instead of learning the lesson of, I need to pay attention and I need to react accordingly, this area now just overreacts. They go, well, we weren't warned last time, so now we have to react. And it's like, no, you still haven't learned the lesson. You didn't pay attention last time. And that's why you didn't react. Now you have gotten just a little bit of information and you're overreacting instead of listening to what's going on and having a reasonable idea of what's going on. And, maybe that's because people don't understand weather. Maybe that's because, there are all of those voices. I'm not really sure. But I think that both ends of the spectrum are equally bad. I think not understanding because you're overreacting is just as bad as not understanding because you're underreacting.
Wow. Awesome point. Awesome point. Um, so I want to just drive a conversation to a couple of last minute points here before we wrap up.
Okay.
First of all, what do you do to get out of weather? I mean, what's your go-to hobby? What's your pastime, your passion, aside from your work and your family?
I work out a lot. I like to work out. That's a baseball thing from the past. I kind of found, I think that any kids that are watching this, I'm not sure you're going to be able to get through that material that we were just discussing. But if you made it this far, any kids that are watching this, I thought that baseball was my escape from school. And then I thought that that's the way that was. And then when schooling got really hard, I realized that exercise in general was my escape from school because once baseball ended, I had to go through meteorology. I had to get my atmospheric science degree. And that was way more difficult than my communication degree, not because of the amount of work, but based on the base of knowledge. It's just that science, the base of knowledge, is just infinite in every direction. And other courseworks, you're building on a block. And in science, you never really have a building block. It's always learning new material. So I think that's what makes it so difficult, especially on the college aspect, is because every year you're compounding infinite information. And it's like, wait, what? So for any kids that are watching this, that ability to be able to go outside and do anything, exercise, run around, play, get those endorphins going will just tremendously help you step away from the stress and rigors of whatever you're going through. I mean, and even from a very young age, you can do that. I mean, kids have stress too. Like, it's not the same stress, but it is stress. And you can break away from that just by exercising, getting out, playing, doing something. And that's really what I do. I get outside. I go outside. I mean, I'm sitting outside of my back porch.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous spot for sure. And that was going to kind of be my sort of wrap up question, but I think you went into it. It's like, if you could go back 10 years and talk to, a younger Ross, what sort of advice would you give that aspiring TV meteorologist? But I think that point about doing something that you can focus your energy and take care of yourself, take care of your health, your mental health as well. That for me would have been my advice, but I think that the exercise point's really important. What else you might sort of mentoring your younger self? What do you think you tell yourself about what's coming?
I would tell everybody, go into as many hobbies as you can. Learn as much about everything that you're interested in as you can. Don't be shut off because school, taught you that this is the way of learning. Learn. Go out, find something that you're enjoying and keep learning. For me, that's weather. I love weather. So I just keep learning weather. But I also love hiking. I also love skiing. I also love playing the guitar. I love exercising. And I haven't stopped doing any of those things just because my job demands me be good at weather. That's that's just part of my job, and that's part of my aspect of who I am. And if I'm honest, my job gets in the way of my love of weather more times than not. I love weather, but sometimes I don't love my job. That's kind of a conflict of interest with itself. But yeah, if I had to tell anybody anything, it's just be inquisitive, learn, go after those things, and continue to grow in other aspects away from whatever may be causing stress. And then, because you can always step back into it and do those things, especially on whatever it is. I mean, I think that everybody feels like if you don't do it right now, you don't have time to do it. And it's nonsense because, I mean, like if you're lucky, you get 60, 70 years on this planet, right? fill that 60, 70 years with good stuff, go do other things, go have fun, get away, break away. Work is not the end all be all. And it's certainly not going to be that way going forward. You're going to have experiences and better things in life than work. So yeah, if I had to mentor myself in now for the past, I would tell Ross that bad things are going to happen. Stress is going to get really, really bad. And life gets exponentially harder, but it doesn't make it less fun or less enjoyable.
There you go.
You just have to enjoy the moments when you can.
That is an awesome.
I think that is the perspective you have to have, especially in our stress-induced business, is that if you can't enjoy the good moments, then you can't enjoy anything.
Beautifully put. I really appreciate those words. They're comforting to me. They've given me a little bit of a confirmation that what I'm doing here with this podcast project, because I'm an old dog, and I'm learning a new trick right here. So I appreciate that that confirmation bias for me, that I can learn just about anything if I can learn to do this.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's true. I mean, going back to what we were talking about earlier with me being dyslexic, coding is not something that is ever going to work in my brain, like coding computers. Yet you will know through the Barron system, we have to code.
Yeah.
We have to learn basic lines of code, and we have to code, and we have to go through those things. And so it's like, that is something that every time I do it is stress inducing. Because I'm like, this is not going to work, and I know it.
There's lots of symbols and spaces and plus signs and letters and numbers. And I watch the Barron people who have our forecasting graphics. I'll watch what they're doing. I'm going, what are they doing?
Like, down or record this so that I can see what you're doing, so that I can fix it next time it breaks.
Record the screen. Yeah, they should loom that for sure. Well, listen, Ross, man, I really appreciate your time today, more than you know. And again, we'll get this all edited up, and this is going to be the first published podcast in the Weather School podcast project. That's a mouthful. But more importantly, I appreciate you being there, and I appreciate that our short time together was, had its moments for sure with that hurricane.
Yeah, but, I will tell you this, since we're still on record, and you can use it whether you want, if you want to or not. I thoroughly enjoyed. You and I only spent about 8 months together, maybe.
Yeah, about.
In our working relationship. I would say that you're probably one of my favorite people I've ever worked with. I thoroughly enjoyed working with you. You're certainly a very genuine individual. Extremely nice, and it's a rare find, especially in our industry that is filled with egos and selfish ambition. It's great when you stumble across somebody who's not like that. So I thoroughly enjoyed our time together for that 8 months, and I was very disappointed. I was thankful for the opportunity that I got by you leaving, but I was very disappointed that we did not get to work together longer. Because I did enjoy that.
Well, I appreciate that more than you know. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you.
So yes, I still tell people that all the time when they ask me, "Oh, you replaced Justin Kiefer," and I'm like, "Yeah, he was awesome. I wish he had never left."
Well, listen, we'll end on that note. Again, I appreciate it. Once everything gets edited up, we'll get this published. We'll share it to you. You can push it out to whoever you want to, or you can tell me to bury it. I don't know what to do, but we'll have it.
If it's good, I'll probably share it.
Hopefully, and I'll edit out the parts where my dogs start barking as much as I possibly can. So once again, thanks, Ross, Chief Meteorologist at WMBB in Panama City, Florida. We will catch up with you down the road. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks.